I think if I take anything away from this movie is how much I love the Chinese. I really love them.
Mulberry Child, a feature-length documentary film based on Jian Ping's book of the same name, was selected as Best of the Fest at the Palm Springs International Film Festival. It was an honor bestowed to only 14 films out of 188 from 73 countries. From a touching autobiography to a powerful movie, director Susan Morgan Cooper impresses audiences by taking an in-depth look at the relationship between a mother and daughter. This award-winning filmmaker is also known for another powerful documentary she wrote, produced, and directed, An Unlikely Weapon, The Eddie Adams Story. We are so glad to have you here with us today. And my first question is, what got you interested in directing this documentary, Mulberry Child?
I think what interested me most, I was fascinated by Jeanne's memoirs of her childhood, which was quite traumatic during the Cultural Revolution. But when I met Jian Ping and her daughter Lisa for the first time, I found there was a slight disconnect between them emotionally. And I thought, here's my angle, how in a sense, Mao's legacy of the Cultural Revolution has trickled down to the relationship between these two women today.
I heard you visit China for the first time to make this movie. How did you handle those challenges of exploring an unfamiliar environment and understanding its history?
Well, nothing quite prepared me for how very, very much at home I would feel in China. I didn't expect that at all because I thought, well, it's very unfamiliar territory. The Chinese people, to me, reminded me of my own people, the Welsh people. They're very warm, very loving and giving, and quite open. I mean, they're so kind. The challenges were that I didn't want to go into China with a whole crew because we were dealing with the Cultural Revolution, and that's sort of a slightly touchy subject. So we took a small still camera called a Canon 5D, which looks as if you're just taking still photographs. So we moved around very, under the radar in a sense. No one knew that we were shooting a film. We traveled to the northeast of China, to a very remote area where they had a mud village. And it was very interesting because Jian Ping would get out of the van and she'd go into the village and talk to the people first and say, is it all right if we come and shoot some photographs? And they'd say yes. And then they'd bring the white devil out from the van, and, that was me, and into the village, because if I just went by myself, I would alert, too much curiosity, I imagine.
Jennifer's book is an autobiography documenting her personal journey from China to US. Mm-hmm. And the movie is more emphasized the relationship between the two generations. So why did you decide to focus on the dynamic between the two generations, Jennifer and her daughter?
Because to me, that was more universal. Mm-hmm. I think this movie resonates with a lot of different people because America is a country of immigrants, Mm-hmm. The older generation has come here and overcome a lot of adversity to get here to the land of opportunity. Mm-hmm. Those people have children who've grown up with freedom of speech, with everything at their fingertips, mm-hmm. in a very privileged way. And sometimes it's hard for the older generation to to tell the younger generation the adversity that they've been through. And I think whether you're Chinese, whether you're Armenian or Greek or whatever nationality, it's the same. And I think that's why the audiences are responding so much. And in the same way, on a universal level, many family members have a slight disconnect. They don't quite understand each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's what life is about. You take a journey and something happens on that journey and you see the light, you see the understanding and the appreciation for that person.
Yeah. So this is a definitely powerful and a touching movie. There are many different scenes. So which scene is the one moved you the most?
When I read Jeanne's book, the scene that made me cry the most was when her mother, who was not used to showing emotion, did not show emotion to her children, did not show emotion to her husband, sat down when she was in detention and wrote the most exquisite poem to her husband. And I read that poem and I was so moved, because knowing how much this poor woman had to hold her family together and go through that adversity, be separated from her husband, and how she could finally let her emotions go and write a poem to help her husband through his troubles. That for me, you know, from the book was very, very moving. And in the movie, I think one of my favorite scenes is the little children were so confused because their mum couldn't tell them what was really happening, because if they spoke about it at school, then the family could be more in trouble. And so Jian Ping and her sister went into the town and meandered through the posters to find news of their father, and they finally found a poster, you know, talking about their father, and that moved me a lot too.
As a film director, what is your expectation from your audience? What do you want them to take away from the movie?
I think I want them to take away from the movie, no matter how tough your life is, no matter what adversity you go through, you have love, the love of your family and the love for yourself. And just like the symbolism of the mulberry tree and how strong it is, you know, that we all have that inner strength. And I'm reminded of a saying that I found on a wall actually while I was walking through Chicago. And it's a saying by Walt Disney. And he said, "The things that unite us are far greater than those that divide us." And I think if I take anything away from this movie is how much I love the Chinese. I really love them.
As a female filmmaker, you
Yeah.
have a very unique perspective and the way of thinking.
Yes.
So what do you think about the roles or influences of female film director in this industry?
For me, I don't really think about that. However, I think that we must, because we're more nurturing. I think in general we're the nurturers, that we probably bring a certain sensibility that a male director doesn't bring.
Born and raised in mainland China, Jian Ping is a first-generation Chinese American. She started to write the book Mulberry Child when still working full-time. The book revealed many unknown stories to her daughter. At the same time, it became great original material for a successful film adaptation. Hi Jian Ping, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Congratulations on the exciting news. Mulberry Child, the feature-length documentary movie based on your book, is going to premiere in Chicago. How do you feel about that?
Wow, it's excitement and also nervousness at the same time, because the film has started showing at 2 film festivals, but it's outside of Chicago, right? But here, many of my friends, Lisa's friends, will be at the
wait,
screening.
right?
Exactly.
When did you start to decide writing the book and why?
I started writing a book almost 10 years ago, and that was back in 2000 when Lisa was still growing up as a teenager. I had a lot of difficulties at that time communicating with her, and so I don't want her to forget where she came from. Lisa was born in China, but she came to the US when she was 4.5, and she really went out of her way trying to be an all-American girl. And in many ways, she is. And so I don't want her to forget, the past, the history, the heritage. And so I began to write the book for her. And that was how it started. But I was working full time. I was traveling a lot. So it took me 8 years on and off to finish the book, which was done in 2008.
What does a mulberry represent?
Oh, I used mulberry tree as a metaphor for resilience. When I was growing up, all the conditions are very harsh. And in the 60s and 70s, I was growing up. In addition to the poor living condition, we also went through a lot of political persecution and difficulties. And mulberry tree in my life always played an important role. As a child, there were several mulberry trees in the backyard where we lived. And we abused the trees, we picked the leaves, picked the berries. And also where I live, it was very cold. The Siberia wind blow over in the winter. I live in the northeast of China. Only the hardest variety of mulberry tree survived there. And so when I was writing the book, I keep thinking about that resilient spirit that mulberry tree represent. And so naturally, when I finished writing the book, I named the book Mulberry Child.
Jian Ping, what are the differences between the book and the movie?
Wow, the book and the movie have a huge difference. The book is strictly on the past. It's a story of my life from the time I was born to when I was 16. I left Baicheng to attend college, and it covers the lives of my grandmother, my parents, my siblings, but everything is in the past. But the film is focused on the present. It's about my relationship with my daughter, Lisa. And I think Susan found we have this dynamic relationship. We love each other, but we also have a lot of disconnections. And so she used this to really explore a universal theme of mother and daughter relationship.
Could you please use a few words to describe those women around you, including yourself?
I'm very fortunate. My story is very much a female story because my grandmother, my mother, my siblings, I have 4 sisters, 1 brother, except my father and my brother in my whole family is mostly female. And I'm fortunate enough, not only Susan Morgan Cooper, my director is a woman, my cinema photographer is a woman too. And so they will really, I feel, catch that subtleties of the mother-daughter, the women relationship. And I remember watching the film for the first time. I was so moved by a scene that shows my mother pushing open a window and shows her hands, twisting together. That shows her emotion. And in my mind, I was like, gosh, I don't know, a man, director or cinema photographer may catch that too. But I feel that is such a female perspective. The details, the subtleties, I just love that. I feel very fortunate we have a women's team mostly to represent mostly a women's story.
Yeah, many people will watch the movie tonight. So what do you want them to take away from it?
Wow, the movie covers so many different perspectives. We have the recent history of China. That's all during my growing up years, especially the 60s and 70s. And so that was a historical lesson I want, especially American audience. They don't know much about China. I want them to walk away to understand where China has come from. Today, China is different. It's booming, economic, political, everything has changed so much. But the 60s, 70s, that China was not that far back, and people didn't know much about that. So I want them to know that. And also from the mother-daughter relationship part, I feel for American audience or Asian American,
Any family.
exactly, any family, they can resonate. And I hope that by watching the film, that will inspire them to reflect on their own relationship and also make efforts to reach out to the other generation, for the mothers, fathers, the parents to reach their children and vice versa. At one screening at the Heartland Film Festival, after the film, one young girl from Taiwan who is about Lisa's age, she came to me to tell me she's going to call her parents in Taiwan that evening. That touched me. I went over, give her a hug, and I feel, different age group. I want them to walk away, feel inspired, informed, and I want them to take action to think about their relationship too.
That's wonderful. And I know that you become more and more busy. What are you going to do next?
Wow.
More books, movies?
Yes, books, definitely, yes. I'm working on a book with Lisa together about her growing up in the U.S. I read my perspective, she read hers.
That's interesting.
And I'm also working on a book with an American girlfriend of mine. We are working on cross-cultural issues. We want to be the ambassador to promote cross-cultural communication. And also after my book was published, I give a lot of talks at schools, special groups, organizations, and I found many Americans, even those who are very interested in China, do not know China that much. So I started publishing books about China. I signed up with a large publisher in China and bring the books they published when I see there is a market that, for books they published that fit the U.S. market. For instance, I released China in the next 30 years, even the 12th 5-year plan of China, the economic, political development in today's China. Those books will give today's American a perspective of what China is going on today. So I want to be the ambassador to bridging the differences between the two countries.
With the hope of better communicating with her daughter Lisa, Jian Ping wrote the book Mulberry Child. Lisa didn't only read the book, but had been with her mother through the whole process of making the documentary Mulberry Child. Has Lisa already understood her mother or felt closer to her? Let's ask Lisa herself. Hi Lisa, how are you?
I'm great, thanks.
You had the opportunity to work with your mom and a great movie director Susan to make a movie about your family. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'd have to say that the way I feel about it now, after everything's been finished, has been, it's so different than where it started. I think 2 years ago when my mom and Susan started this project, I really came into it kicking and screaming reluctantly. I didn't want to get involved. And now I think, we've been to a few festivals and the responses that we've gotten from people and the way that people connect to our story is so amazing and I think so touching. And now it's a project that I'm so incredibly proud of.
Do you think the whole experience has helped you close the gap of you and your mom?
So, Helen, I think that's a great question. And, I think I would relate it to, whether you're Chinese or American or Italian, for that matter. I think there's always a prior generation that's trying to tell you about, you know, the hardships they endured and how you should be appreciative and how you should be so thankful for what you have. And no one wants to hear it, right? Like when I remember my friends and their grandparents telling them, you know, like when I was a kid, I would walk to school 12 miles bare feet up hills both ways with no shoes on, you know, and it was winter 12 months out of, you know, 12. And they're like, yeah, okay, whatever, Grandpa, you know, you're full of crap. And I think for me, I had that same resistance where my mom gave me, you know, even before the book was ever published, she would give me copies of the manuscript. And I would say, I don't have time to read it, you know, like that's really great, I'm really happy for you. But I didn't really want to get involved. And I think, you know, the book was part of it. And when I finally read the book, it probably took me about 8 months after my mom first gave me the finished book to even start reading it. But I think that was really the first step in seeing my family and my parents as real people and having a better understanding for what they endured. And this whole film process, I think, has opened that up so much more, you know. And I wouldn't say that we're there, you know, and everything's just, we're this close, you know, and I totally understand everything and I'm so appreciative and I'm 100% a different person. But I think that I appreciate things more and that it's offered me an amazing amount of insight.
Yeah, you are an honest girl. Did you have the moment where you suddenly feel you were able to understand your mother more, or it was a gradual process?
Well, I think it's to be completely honest, I think it's still a process that's ongoing. Mm-hmm. Every, you know, film festival that we go to, every time we screen the film, I think it opens things up just a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Gosh, I'm getting a little teary. You know, and I think it's even more than my relationship with my mom, you know, mm-hmm. seeing my grandparents and my family and everyone in a different light. It's equally rewarding as it is just difficult. You know, you kind of don't realize all the feelings that are down there that, you know, you've kind of just ignored or not even, you know, thought about for all these years. And this process has been kind of digging that up. And
do you have any words you want to tell your mom during the process?
Oh my God.
But you haven't gotten the chance to tell yet?
Maybe just to, you know, thank her for the amount of courage and bravery that she had to write something like that, but also for her persistence on not giving up on me for, you know, I think even now, like, yeah, whatever, you know, it doesn't matter, and we go through this process, you know, because I think to care is often harder than to not care, you know, and to put up walls and not let things affect you. And so I'm not there yet, but I would like to tell her that I appreciate it.
We want to know, what's your definition of the happiness? I think your mom wants to know too.
Well, for me, I think it's more so a feeling and a knowing. You know, I think that we need to have a good understanding that everyone's personal happiness is very individual. And for me, it's contentment and balance, you know, feeling a sense of accomplishment and productivity, but also feeling a sense of thrill and excitement. Where I feel the most alive, I found, is when I travel and when I see things and experience new things. And so I make sure to get as much of that into my life as possible. You know, my friends are a huge part of my life. You know, they're my family in a lot of ways. And so I try to keep them in my life and prioritize them as much as I can. I know that my mom would like to see me count family in as a higher priority, and I'm working at it, you know, but it's hard because I think, like, I want to have the most fun possible, and sometimes, you know, spending a ton of time with family isn't the most fun thing you could possibly imagine doing. So we're finding ways to integrate that.
I grew up in China during China's Cultural Revolution. Millions had their lives destroyed, their reputation ruined. My father was one of those people. I came to the US to provide a better life for Lisa. Just looking at her and feeling the disconnection between us, I sometimes wonder if I did the right thing.
The more you try to force something, the more it doesn't work. Like, you can't force this kind of stuff.
You want to say that hardship where I come from, you don't want her to forget that.
I have this responsibility. I feel I'm fulfilling the dreams and the expectations of the whole generation.
And somehow, by knowing where these people come from and, you know, their backstories, like, they become real people, and I'm not sure if I wanted that.
I grew up with a mulberry tree in the backyard. I watched it as a child, how it survived the cold winter. And each spring, it came back to life. I wish I could let myself go. I could express my feelings to her. I am proud of her. Nana said, no matter what storm comes, don't break. You must be strong, like the mulberry tree.